Every piece of data that is coming out about the housing market is absolutely terrible. Are we in a housing recession worse than 2008? As you guys know, listeners of this channel, I've been going over that we've seen some of the worst numbers that we've seen in over 50 years, as we're seeing the demand for housing fall off a cliff, and July was no better. As we went through and we had the July new home sales now going down again. Although the June numbers were revised a little bit higher, home sales just keep on falling. And it's not like in Kanye West's song in the College Dropout, all falls down being a good thing. This is a bad thing here, folks, as we're seeing the single family home prices following a sharp upward revision to the prior month's sales price, and the overall trend remained consistent with a housing market struggling in an environment of high mortgage rates. So the new home sales units dropped 0.6% to the seasonally adjusted annualized rate of 652,000. And this sales pace was upgraded to 656,000, so only 4,000 better than last or worse than last month. But economists polled by Reuters had forecasted the new home sales would be up more than 10% to 630 sales units. So we're seeing a decrease of 8.2% year over year, and in a housing market where these things are not supposed to move as quickly as we're seeing a dire emergency in the overall housing market, where these dips and the builders, they're just struggling to entice reluctant buyers. If you guys saw the first time in history, last time when I was on this live chat with you guys, we saw, new home prices actually be worth less than existing home prices. And this was the first time we saw that in history. First time ever. And now we're seeing, these new home builders struggle mightily with all of this. And the housing data just keeps looking uglier and uglier as time goes on. But the narrative is not that we're in a 2008 recession or even a dot-com bubble or anything along those lines. It's just, hey, you know what? Mortgage rates are high. We need to cut interest rates. We need to cut interest rates and make sure that when we do that, hey, everybody's going to flow into housing. But I don't think that's necessarily the case here. We're seeing an extremely weak dollar, the weakest we've seen in a year start in over 50 years. And then on top of that, we're seeing just the development of this housing market not be great, because we saw the inflation affect housing the most drastic. I don't know if you guys remember, a couple years ago, we had in markets like Tampa, Austin, where I'm from, Nashville, some of these other places, people from the Northeast, California, all these places coming down and buying all these houses 100, 200,000 over asking price in cash. You don't see that in a healthy housing market. So the FOMO that we had rising there was just absolutely insane. And then when we look at the overall housing numbers, hey, you know what? Guess what? They don't look great, probably because they needed a little bit of a connection. So the demand is very weak and the rates remain still elevated. And sellers appear wary, but buyers may return to the market in spring to take advantage of deals on the margin. I know a couple people that have cut some few good deals here, but these home prices continuing to slide and bringing down the median July sales price, it is very wary just because of how much wealth is held in the homes of the average American. I mean, the average American holds majority of their wealth there, and it's their biggest purchase that they'll ever make is their home. And now we're seeing those prices plummet. And, there's a lot of different various ways you could pull out money and all these things. But what we are seeing is some tension in this market here where, there is some manipulation, as we're seeing in the chat here. But this is back from February, right? The outlook. They expect housing prices to rise by the end of this year. Higher for longer interest rates is here to stay, With mortgage rates ease only slightly from 6.7%, and President Trump's policies could have complex implications on the housing market, particularly the issue of affordability, right? So, you know, the Wells Fargo Housing Market Index, the present sales of new single family homes and the expected sales of single family homes are all, you know, falling down and not looking solid. So what we're seeing is, as we're saying, a symptom of potentially manipulated fiat, and the pressure that we're seeing from this housing market onto the new, I guess, like system that we're starting to see, right? I mean, with Jerome Powell keeping interest rates as high as he is, he's been having to evaluate the overall monetary policy. What is going on? I mean, are they going to cut interest rates? Are they not? We've got 23 days until this happens, and it seems like they're going to. But even with a lower interest rate environment, even with this 83% chance that they're going to cut interest rates, will mortgage rates fall as drastically as people assume? To be honest, I don't really think that that's going to be the case. Everybody and their mother is thinking once we cut interest rates, everything is going to be fine. We're going to see everything skyrocket in flight. And I don't think that's the case. I think we're actually going to see a crash when we lower interest rates just because of how much fluff we currently see in the market. So these, real estate investors, these first-time home buyers that are coming in, mortgage rates falling and real estate stocks jumping after the Fed speech. Well, these makes the markets more forward-looking. So I think when the rates are actually cut, right, that's when we're going to see the revision in the other direction. That's where we're going to start to see some hairiness in the market. This is something we got to keep a very close eye on because there's some trouble here. There's some trouble afoot, right? I mean, with the housing market, with the U.S. controlling the monetary policy, with Jerome Powell at odds with Donnie T, well, Donald Trump is a big, giant real estate investor, so he's pushing for these lower interest rates. But we're not there yet, right? Everybody's saying it's a buyer's market, but nobody is buying. Where is Jerome Powell? He needs to come to the rescue, right? Existing home sales keep on dropping, and mortgage rates still hover around that 6.6%. So if you flip through the real estate pages, pull up Redfield, something's glaringly obvious. Nobody's moving and nobody's buying homes right now. The hottest markets in Florida, the Panhandle. It now looks like a heat map. Look at that. The description that they're making on here, right, is absolutely incredible. Now, with the now we got an ad playing for it here. So we're seeing the, housing market just take off, and the Dixie actually responding pretty well today. You guys know on this channel that I've been covering how poor the Dixie has been, and we're actually having a pretty good revision right now. Now, Derek is saying he went to look at houses on Sunday and still blank is too taxed, and I'm in Florida. I'm in Florida as well, brother. So I think we're starting to see, maybe some of this revision back to the norm, so to speak, here. But I mean, I think the way the housing market and All Nighter Hider saying, I know a lot of buyers, good people looking to provide quality housing for those that don't want or can't buy a house. I agree. But, I think that what we're seeing is just, as everybody in the chat is saying, the microcosm of this inflated monetary system that we've seen. Everybody's calling for Jerome Powell to cut interest rates. Trump is basically going at his neck every single day saying, hey, cut interest rates, cut interest rates, cut interest rates. It seems like he's going to do it in like 3 weeks plus here. But on the flip side of things, we are seeing the potential of, a housing crash. Everything is being overinflated at this point in time. And so because everything's being overinflated and some of the I guess trash is coming through, what we're seeing is, the new housing price or the new homes really getting higher than the existing homes. There is some issues here, right? So when we're seeing things that are in the housing market the first time in history, when I'm showing you guys statistics that we've never seen in 50 years, you know, and these things are worse than the 2008 housing crash, you got to ask yourself, what the hell is going on? And why are we seeing such negative, housing data? Everybody's trying to minimize this, but I'm trying to raise some awareness for you guys and keep a very close eye on what we see with this housing data. And I think what All Nighter Hider in the chat is saying that there's a lot of people on the sidelines, but I think that they're not going to like when the rates go down, people are going to anticipate that the prices of these houses go up. So if there is a lot of money sitting on the sidelines here, I mean, that's just going to inflate everything across the board. And then that's not a benefit for these first-time home buyers. Right? I think actually a net negative when these people are just kind of waiting on the sidelines here. So I think we need to keep a very close eye on the housing market because even though it's very slow moving, it tends to be, a leading indicator in what is going on in the overall market. McLovin saying one home buyer's high ROI is another home buyer's higher cost. It's not sustainable. Exactly. I mean, we're seeing the medium home price is like $500,000. I mean, that's just not sustainable, folks. It is just not sustainable to see this. All Nighter Hider saw that in the beginning. I have reached 300 subs, so I do appreciate all you guys coming in and hitting that subscribe button. Help me reach that 500 mark now. Now I got to aim for half the 1,000 to get this channel then monetized slightly. But housing, I think, is definitely going to be going sideways. I honestly think we might see like a little bit of a downward, and depending on the market, the downward revision that we're going to see in some markets. I'm in Tampa, myself included. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see somewhat of a correction here. Grew up in Austin, wouldn't be surprised if we see one there. And unfortunately, it kind of is. All of these, homes all the expenses get passed down to the renters. So renting is just going to get more and more expensive. Allegedly, home buying is going to get cheaper. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. I just ripped for an hour or 45 minutes on the other channel, so I'm going to keep this one a little bit short. But make sure you guys are smoking that like Cheech and Chong, hitting that subscribe button. Help me get to 500. Let's do it before the end of September. Let's explode this thing, and I will keep this thing going every single day. So thank you guys all for coming out and a lively chat.